Hi guys, Virginia Kuziomko here. This is the 9th video in my video series, and today I have invited Peter Drougas with Drougas Home Inspections to speak with us about why what they are, why they're important, and how you can utilize them as a buyer and a seller. So, welcome Peter. Thank you for sitting with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So, why should we'll start with a buyer. Why should a buyer inspect a property that they plan on purchasing?
Well, it's pretty much like anything else you don't know about. So if you're purchasing a car or refrigerator, anything you're buying, and you don't know anything about it, how could you know if there's something wrong? So it's just that idea of just saying, I need someone to look at this because I need to know what's going on so that I can make a decision about going forward with it, or if it's nothing that bad, to say, okay, I can handle that, I can fix it, or to say, no, it's too much, I can't handle that. So it's just giving you information, even like going to your doctor. You know yourself, but you don't know if there's anything wrong with you. So you go to a doctor to find out, oh, by the way, is there anything wrong with me? And they can say, yeah, or hopefully no,
right.
Everything's fine. But it's just to have somebody who can get you that information so you make a smart purchase. So that thing with buyer beware, well, now it's not like that. You actually can get the information so you can make a smart purchase.
So why, if someone is planning on selling their home, what might they want to get an inspection prior to selling?
That's actually very helpful because homeowners, when I'm doing an inspection and I find something really bad with the house, the homeowner didn't even know that was happening. They had no idea that this horrible thing was going on with their foundation or in their attic or something like that. So now after they've gone through the whole point of having the purchase and sale and they think they've got this house sold, I come along and say, yeah, but you've got this huge problem. Now the buyers are renegotiating or they're walking away, where if they had known this before, they could have figured out, do they want to fix it? Do they want to reduce the price of the house because of it? But at some point, at least react to it and not suddenly be surprised that there's something wrong with your house and you didn't even know it.
Right.
So a pre-listing inspection is actually a pretty good idea too.
Okay. Yeah, and then when the agent lists it, sometimes it can increase the fact that they're disclosing all of the...
Right, to give the buyer peace of mind of saying, we've already been through this house, we've dealt with anything of major concern, and yeah, give them that peace of mind that the house has already been gone through.
Okay. What are some people when they're purchasing a house don't really know much about the process. So what are some common misconceptions that you feel that maybe a buyer has about inspection or...
Well, one is that we have X-ray vision and that we know everything. We're not necessarily a plumber, electrician, a framer, a contractor, a roofer, foundation, concrete person. So again, I love using that doctor analogy. We're not brain surgeons or pulmonary specialists, but your family doctor knows enough that they can say, well, you need to see a specialist because I don't like what I'm seeing here. Right. So we can be the same way. We can't take the house apart. A lot of people will say, well, what's the insulation behind the wall? I don't know. Right. I'm not allowed to take the house apart, so I can't find out. But I can look for signs that maybe there's something wrong to say this actually does have to get looked at further, and whatever the trade person that should be looking at it further. But yeah, there's that misconception that they think that we can figure out everything, and also the idea that they think, well, this isn't working, so why don't you just turn it on and inspect it? But we're not allowed to turn it on because it could be off for a reason. That they already know it leaks, they already know this electrical thing is sparking, so that's why they shut it off. They just forgot to put a note on it to say, don't turn it on. Right. So when we show up, we're not allowed to turn stuff on like that. So it's that they look at you like, well, that's why I hired you. Yeah, but you're supposed to have everything on when we get there. Yeah.
Okay.
So that sort of thing. Other than that, it's just and the other misconception is just because we looked at it that day, it doesn't mean it's going to be okay 3 months from now.
Right.
So ours doing an inspection isn't a guarantee that nothing else is going to happen to the house after we walk away.
Right.
So I call that the light bulb effect, that you can turn on a switch and the light bulb suddenly goes out. You would say, okay, I get it, the light bulb was out. Right. But if you turn on your heating system 6 months after moving in and it suddenly doesn't turn on, they would call the inspector and say, my heating system doesn't work, why didn't you catch that?
Right.
There wasn't anything wrong with it when I inspected.
Can't tell the future.
That's so there's that misconception. It's just we can only tell you what's happening that day, and it's frustrating for us because we want to give that information. So there have been times when I've checked a faucet, it leaked, and I said, oh, come here, I want to show you how this is leaking, and I can't get it to leak again. while I'm showing it to them, or vice versa. So it's that kind of a weird thing. But, you know, a decent inspector will just simply try to operate everything. So at least they can say, when I walked out of this house after 2-3 hours, I operated everything, I turned everything on and off, opened and closed everything, did everything I could, here's what happened, welcome to homeownership.
Right.
And yeah, you just hope for the best.
Right, of course. Things that, owning a home, I mean, things happen for sure.
Yeah.
Now, in this area, we have a lot of private water. Not everybody, a lot of people have town water, but private water and sewer.
Yeah.
What's the importance of getting that checked, and why should people be extra vigilant?
With the septic systems, because you can't see them. So you can have a leach field that's failed, and you would never know it. Just being in the house and flushing toilets and draining things out, and that's true with public sewer systems. That sewer line from the house to the street is going to be the homeowner's property. So in a really old home, if you're not having that looked at with a special camera, because home inspectors won't look at that, but that you might need to have that looked at to make sure that that's not cracked or has roots growing through it. The septic system, again, you have to have a tank and a leach field. And now in the state of New Hampshire, you have to be certified, licensed to be a septic inspector, where in the past some home inspectors were trying to do it, but they didn't really know what they were doing, and they were just finding tricky ways to word it so they wouldn't get in trouble if they messed up. But that's a system you cannot see. You have to have it opened up and looked at. And then the well, the same thing. Obviously you can drink a glass of water and you have no idea what's in it. So you have to send a sample to a lab and see what you're actually drinking.
Okay. Now, New Hampshire and Maine specifically, we do have a lot of older homes. Are there things that older homes have that maybe newer homes wouldn't, that you're checking for?
Just in the sense of aging, probably more than anything else. Older homes are a lot more interesting and fun. New homes are boring. You go in and you can put your arm around a corner and turn on a light switch, and you didn't have to see it. You knew it was there. In older homes, you don't know where anything's going to be because everything was, different. So it's a lot more fun. But I joke with people to say, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm over 100," because I can walk into these homes and they'll say, "Well, what is that?" I go, "Oh, back in the 1910, they used to, do this." And like, "How do you know?" And
You've seen a lot of
I'm
houses,
old.
right?
So they're a lot more interesting, but because there's so many leftover components, whether it's wiring, plumbing, you have to be able to at least put them at ease to say, "Oh no, don't worry about that. That's back when they used to do this."
Right.
Or when they used to do this, we don't do that anymore, so you have to decide about upgrading it. And that has to do with like venting in an attic or smoke alarms or just structural things to say, back in the day that was okay, but it doesn't really work today, so you might have to reinforce this thing.
What about like hazardous materials?
As inspectors, we don't really get involved in hazardous materials, so that's why some people will say, "Are you checking hazardous waste?" And like, no, nothing to do with that. And then it depends on what you consider hazardous. So, if you're talking about asbestos or lead or radon, you can categorize them as hazardous, but there's just a whole aspect of that that's really separate from what I think most people consider hazardous waste. But that would be the closest thing. But even again, in the state of New Hampshire, you can't do lead testing unless you're certified. Asbestos, that material that you think might be asbestos has to be sent to a lab. Radon, you can't tell anything by looking at anything or smelling anything, so you have to have special tests done. So they all require special, specific testing. State of Maine requires certification for radon testing. State of New Hampshire doesn't. But so there's some things we can touch on, but we have to be careful because we can step into areas that we're not.
So you can see, you know what things look like. So you can say, well, this looks like this, you might want to have it tested.
Yeah. I mean, I could, be show off and have situations where I said, "That's asbestos." And everyone's like, "No, it's not." I'm telling you it is. Right. And they sent the sample in, and yeah, it was.
Right.
So, but that's the thing of knowing homes over the years. You just know what stuff is most likely asbestos.
Right.
And then what stuff is what we consider bad asbestos, meaning when you break it, the fibers just go off, and that's what you breathe in, versus a tile that you snap and the fiber kind of goes on one side or the other. It doesn't really fray out the fibers. So we're not so worried about some asbestos, but other situations it's too easily damaged. And then a lot of people think that asbestos was banned in the 80s, but our lovely government rescinded that and didn't tell anybody. So asbestos is still actually in building components as recently as like 10 years ago.
Okay.
So asbestos is still, unfortunately,
But lead is
around.
1978.
Lead is 1978, and the only thing about lead is a lot of people think it's about peeling paint, but it's also about lead dust of different components rubbing up against each other, doors, windows. So I know there was a study that I was looking into in Manchester where low-income children were having elevated levels of lead because they're not taking care of these old homes, and no one's eating peeling paint, but they're breathing in all this dust coming off the paint,
Right.
and they're finding elevated levels of lead in children in Manchester. So there are aspects of lead that a lot of people just think, oh, peeling paint, but there's more to it than that.
Right. Okay. And anything else you might think that consumers, buyers, and sellers might want to be aware of when it comes to inspections? Like, what's the average cost to that?
I think some guys might be as low as 300. I'm usually around 350, 375 for a basic home, like a ranch cape. It can go up to 400, 450.
Larger.
Some guys are in what I consider my base fee just to do a basic house at 350 could be 500 for somebody else. And I don't, that's up to them.
Right. And that's for the
But-
general home inspection?
Yeah, the
That's
general home
inspection.
inspection, and then if you do have to do the septic system and then the radon testing, and if you're on a well and do water testing, you really have to be ready for easily $1,000, so just
Okay.
over, paying different people for some of those
Right.
tests. But unfortunately, it does add up.
But it's a small insurance policy for the bigger.
It's information you really should have.
Right.
And one could argue that even a person not selling their house should probably do that maybe every 5 or 10 years.
Right. 'Cause things
Certainly
change.
test their water,
Right.
their water samples, have their own septic system inspected, So these are things that anybody should do, but because they're not required to, it's only like with car registration and, you have to get the car
Right,
inspected,
it's
where the house you
regulated.
don't have to, so I don't care what's going on with that.
Right. Right.
So,
Okay. Well, thanks for coming to speak with me today, so people
Pleasure.
can see us. So Peter works in New Hampshire and Maine, and is licensed in New Hampshire, doesn't have to be licensed in Maine, which he informed us. And if you have any further questions, you can always post them below, or you can email me at virginia.k@kw.com. And if you want to ask Peter specifically, you can contact him.
at 603-882-1400 or DrougasInspections.com.
And there's a lot of information on your website too.
Yes, I get great reviews on the website. There's an order form at the website to order an inspection, but there's a lot of information at the website too.
Okay.
Stuff.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.